In 1853, deep in the ruined libraries of Nineveh, a clay tablet was pulled from the dust, catalogued, and forgotten. When linguists finally translated the passage in the late 20th century, they found something that should not exist. The tablet named a southern continent. It described rivers. It described mountains. It listed rulers by name. The land it described matched no known geography in the ancient Mesopotamian world. The land it described was buried under 2 miles of ice. If suppressed history fascinates you, subscribe before this gets pulled. I cover the evidence mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge every single week. The Sumerians named a continent that nobody on Earth was supposed to know existed. They wrote about it 5,000 years before Antarctica was officially discovered. And the one place on this planet where independent excavation is functionally impossible is the exact place their tablet describes. The tablet was part of a much larger collection. When Austin Henry Layard and his successors excavated the ruins of Nineveh in the mid-19th century, they recovered over 30,000 clay tablets from the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. Most of those tablets recorded what you would expect from an ancient civilization: administrative records, tax accounts, religious hymns, lists of kings. But scattered throughout the collection were tablets that didn't fit. Tablets describing things the Sumerians and their successors should not have known. The continent tablet was one of those anomalies. It sat in the British Museum's storage for over a century before anyone tried to translate it carefully. The cuneiform was dense, the dialect older than the surrounding texts, and the place names didn't correspond to anywhere on the standard maps of ancient Mesopotamia. The linguist who finally cracked it was a specialist in archaic Sumerian, working through a backlog of untranslated material in the 1970s. What he found stopped him cold. The tablet described a land far to the south, beyond the great waters, ringed by mountains, fed by 4 rivers, warm and green and inhabited. The text named it Kuga Ki, a term that appears in scattered Sumerian sources, but which mainstream scholarship has never been able to locate. The tablet did more than name the continent. It listed the people who lived there. One name in particular stood out: Nali Lisu, translated as the human being who glistens and shines with wisdom. A leader, a ruler, a man whose name was preserved on a clay tablet in Mesopotamia, thousands of years after the land he ruled had vanished from human memory. The linguist prepared his findings for publication. He cross-referenced his translation with 3 other tablets from the same collection. He approached his university with a draft paper, and then the consequences began. His funding was reduced. His department head suggested he focus on more conventional projects. When he insisted on publishing, the paper was rejected by every journal he submitted to. Within 5 years, his position had been quietly eliminated. His name was removed from the institutional record. The tablet itself was reclassified, moved from the general study collection into restricted archives where access requires clearance that is almost never granted. The official explanation given was preservation. The clay was fragile, the cuneiform was deteriorating, public study would damage the artifact. The same explanation is given for dozens of other tablets that challenge the accepted timeline of human civilization. And as with those other tablets, the explanation falls apart on inspection. Hundreds of clay tablets in far worse condition remain on permanent display in the same museum. The difference is that those tablets confirm what we already believe about ancient Mesopotamia. This one does not. This one names a continent we are told nobody knew existed. This one preserves the name of a ruler we are told never lived. This one points to a land we are told has been buried under ice for at least the last 12,000 years. The translator is gone. The paper was never published. The tablet sits in storage. But the translation survived in the notes of researchers who came after him. And what those notes describe is impossible. To understand why this tablet should not exist, you have to understand what the Sumerians were not supposed to know. According to every accepted timeline, the Sumerians appeared in southern Mesopotamia around 4,500 BCE, They invented writing. They built the first cities. They developed irrigation, mathematics, and basic astronomy. They were advanced for their period, but they were still primitive by any modern standard. They had no telescopes, no satellites, no way to see beyond what the naked eye could observe from the ground. The brightest stars, the moon, the visible planets, that was their limit. At least, that is the official position. The problem is that the evidence keeps refusing to cooperate. The Sumerians knew about Uranus and Neptune, planets that cannot be seen without magnification. They mapped the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and described it as the hammered bracelet, a phrase that suggests they understood it as a ring of broken material. They calculated the length of a year to within minutes of our modern measurement. They knew the Earth was a sphere. They tracked precession, the slow wobble of the planetary axis, a cycle that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete, and which mainstream science only formally identified in the 2nd century BCE. And they wrote about a southern landmass before anyone in their hemisphere should have known a southern continent existed. None of this fits the official story. None of this can be explained by gradual development or careful observation. Mainstream archaeology calls it coincidence. It calls it mistranslation. It calls it the projection of modern concepts onto ancient texts. But the tablets are clear. The Sumerians themselves never claimed they figured any of this out on their own. In their own words, repeated across thousands of clay tablets, they said the same thing. The knowledge came from the Anunnaki, beings who descended from the heavens, beings who walked among humans, taught them science, ruled over them as kings before the flood. Modern scholars dismiss this as mythology, primitive humans creating stories to explain natural phenomena. But what if the Sumerians were telling the truth? What if the reason their knowledge is impossibly advanced is because someone gave it to them? Someone who actually knew what the planet looked like. Someone who had seen it from above. The tablet that names the continent contains a passage that has been quietly excluded from most published translations. It describes the descent of the ice sea. It describes the moment the southern cap broke and slid into the sea. It describes coastlines exposed for the first time in living memory, bays and rivers and inhabited valleys revealed as the white wall pulled back. The text does not describe this from the ground. It describes it from above, from the perspective of beings who watched the event happen and recorded what they saw. 13,000 years ago, the last ice age ended abruptly. Geological evidence confirms this. The southern ice cap experienced a partial collapse that exposed land which had been buried for tens of thousands of years. The Sumerian tablet describes the same event in detail. The question is not whether the event happened. The question is, who was in a position to watch it happen and write it down? The Sumerians named two places that have never been confidently located on any map of the ancient world, Dilmun and Kuga Ki. Dilmun appears repeatedly across Sumerian literature. The Pure Land, the land of the living, the place where sickness and death did not exist, the land where the rivers ran sweet and the fields grew without labor. Mainstream scholarship places Dilmun in modern Bahrain. The identification is convenient. It puts a problematic place name on a known map. It closes a question that the texts themselves leave wide open. The problem is that the descriptions do not match Bahrain. Bahrain is a small, hot, low-lying island. The texts describe a vast continent of mountains and forests, ringed by water, fed by great rivers, populated by named rulers and organized cities. Bahrain has none of these features. It never did. Kuga Ki is even harder to place. The texts describe it as a land far to the west and south, separated from Mesopotamia by oceans, governed by leaders who maintained communication with the homeland through what the tablets describe as the boats of heaven. Mainstream scholars have given up trying to locate Kuga Ki on any conventional map. The standard position is that Kuga Ki was mythological, a symbolic place, a literary device. But the tablet that names the continent identifies Kuga Ki directly. It places it beyond the southern waters. It describes its geography in detail that matches no known land in the Sumerian world. It matches one place. It matches Antarctica before the ice. The implication has been pushed for decades by researchers willing to accept the consequences. They argue that Dilmun and Kuga Ki were not metaphors. They were locations. They were the temperate, habitable regions of a southern continent that froze over within a few generations and was lost to human memory. And there is more. In the past decade, two independent researchers, William James Viel and Dr. Clyde Winters, published what they describe as linear Sumerian inscriptions visible on the Antarctic coast. Satellite imagery of Marambio Island near the Antarctic Peninsula appears to show carved characters that Winters, an epigrapher with decades of work in early Sumerian script, transliterated as "the patron is mighty." A second inscription, embedded into the Ross Sea shoreline, was read as a Sumerian dedication to one of the Arctic chiefs. A third, set within what appears to be a carved human portrait, contained the name Nali Lisu. The same name, the same ruler, recorded on a clay tablet in Mesopotamia and on a stone face on the coast of Antarctica. The mainstream archaeological community has refused to acknowledge the inscriptions. The standard response is that the satellite images show natural rock formations, the patterns are pareidolia, the human eye finding meaning in random shapes. But the inscriptions are organized. The characters are consistent with linear Sumerian, the names match, and the location matches the geography described in the tablet. The Sumerians did not just name the continent. According to the surviving evidence, they walked on it, they carved on it, they left the names of their leaders on its coast, and then the ice came back. And then the names became impossible. And then the continent disappeared from the official record entirely. The tablet does not stand alone. There is a second body of evidence that corroborates everything the cuneiform describes. There are maps. In 1929, a Turkish naval officer named Halil Edhem discovered a parchment in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. It had been drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. The map showed the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and the northern coast of Antarctica. The Antarctica on the map was not the Antarctica we know today. There was no ice. The map showed coastlines, mountain ranges, and river deltas. It showed the geography of Queen Maud Land as it would appear without the ice cap. Piri Reis stated openly that he had not surveyed the coast himself. He had drawn the map from older sources. Source maps, he wrote, that dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, some of them older still. Maps from a civilization he did not name. In 1949, a British and Swedish seismic survey mapped the land beneath the Antarctic ice for the first time using sound penetration through the ice cap. The results matched the Piri Reis map almost line for line. In 1960, Charles Hapgood, a professor of history at Keene State College, took the map to the United States Air Force. The cartographic experts at Westover Air Force Base confirmed the accuracy. They went further. They concluded that the map's projection required spherical trigonometry, knowledge of the curvature of the Earth, and the kind of precise longitudinal measurement that requires either aerial reconnaissance or satellite imaging. The map's projection center was located on the Great Pyramid at Giza. The Piri Reis map is not the only one. The Oronteus Phineus map of 1531 shows Antarctica as two landmasses separated by an ice-buried waterway. That structure was only confirmed by ice-penetrating radar in the 1950s. The Buache map of 1737 shows the continent ice-free with detailed interior waterways. Buache stated explicitly that he had based his work on ancient source documents. The Zeno map of 1380 shows Greenland ice-free, with fjords and inlets that match modern subglacial radar surveys with disturbing precision. None of these mapmakers had the technology to survey what they drew. None of them had the means to see beneath ice. They were copying. Each one stated, in his own words, that he was working from older sources, sources that no longer exist, sources that were already ancient when the maps we still have were drawn. Connect this to the tablet. The tablet describes a continent ringed by mountains, fed by 4 rivers, inhabited by named rulers. The maps show a continent ringed by mountains, fed by river deltas, geographically detailed in a way that matches the tablet's description. The tablet describes the descent of the ice. The maps show the continent before the descent. The tablet preserves the names of the rulers. The maps preserve the geography of the kingdom. They are pieces of the same record. They were created by, or copied from, the same lost source. And the source map's projection center sits on the Great Pyramid at Giza, the structure whose own dimensions encode the polar radius and the equatorial circumference of the Earth. The civilization the tablet names was not local, it was global, and it was mapping the planet. The physical evidence beneath the ice is not theoretical, it is documented. It has been documented for decades, and every time researchers try to follow it to a conclusion, the work goes quiet. Begin with the geology. Core samples taken from the Ross sea floor between 1949 and the present have produced a consistent picture. Pollen layers, sediment patterns indicating river deltas, organic material consistent with temperate vegetation. The dates run as recently as 6,000 years ago. Mainstream science attributes this to natural climate fluctuation. Independent geologists argue the data points to something far more abrupt. Parts of Antarctica were ice-free, vegetated, and potentially habitable within the same window the Sumerian tablet describes. The tablet places named rulers on a green continent. The cores place green vegetation on the same continent at the same time. The two records line up. Then there are the structures. In 2016, satellite imagery available through Google Earth showed 3 pyramidal formations partially visible beneath the ice in the Ellsworth Mountains. Mainstream geologists called them nunataks, mountain peaks shaped by wind and erosion. Independent researchers noted the geometric precision, the consistent angles between faces, the alignment with cardinal directions, and the spatial relationship between the 3 structures. Nunataks do not align in groups. Nunataks do not present uniform faces. The structures match the description of the temple. Complexes the surviving Sumerian texts attribute to the rulers of Kuga Ki. In 2012, a Russian team drilling at Lake Vostok reached a subglacial body of water that had been sealed beneath 2 miles of ice for at least 15 million years. The team reported microbial life forms isolated for that entire period. They also reported magnetic anomalies, suggesting metallic structures or high-density mineral formations arranged in configurations that do not occur naturally. The team was pulled from the site abruptly. The project was reclassified. The follow-up data was never released. The lead researcher gave a brief interview, walked back his earlier statements, and stopped speaking publicly about the expedition. Connect this to the tablet. The tablet names rulers. The Antarctic inscriptions identified by Vial and Winters preserve those same names on the surface. The maps preserve the geography. The core samples confirm the climate the tablet describes. And now the magnetic anomalies suggest the structures themselves are still down there. Buried, sealed, frozen in place, waiting. The pattern of suppression is consistent. Researchers who have tried to publish full analyses of the Antarctic anomalies have lost grants. Their funding has been quietly redirected. Their universities have suggested they pursue more conventional work. The data exists. The papers do not. There is one more piece. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 prohibits independent excavation, mineral extraction, and unauthorized exploration on the continent. It is the only landmass on Earth where a private archaeological dig is functionally illegal. The justification given is environmental preservation. The continent is delicate, the ecosystem is unique. Human disturbance must be minimized. Reasonable on the surface. except that the same treaty does not prevent military presence, deep ice drilling by approved national programs, or the steady stream of unexplained scientific expeditions by countries with no obvious research interest in subglacial microbiology. The Sumerians name the continent, the maps confirm its shape, the cores confirm its climate, the anomalies confirm its structures, and the treaty confirms that nobody is allowed to look. Something happened to the continent. The tablet describes it. The maps record what was lost. The core samples mark the date. And the geological evidence confirms the event. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth experienced a sudden, catastrophic climate reversal. Geologists call it the Younger Dryas. The accepted theory in mainstream science is that a comet or asteroid fragment struck the northern ice sheet, triggering massive flooding, rapid temperature drops, and the abrupt end of the last ice age. Sea levels rose by over 400 feet within a single human lifetime. Entire coastlines disappeared. Civilizations along those coastlines, if any existed, were buried beneath the rising waters. But the Younger Dryas alone does not explain Antarctica. Antarctica did not rise underwater. Antarctica froze. Charles Hapgood proposed an explanation that Albert Einstein himself found compelling enough to write a foreword for. Einstein wrote that Hapgood's theory deserved serious attention from researchers and that the hypothesis of crustal displacement was supported by the available evidence. The theory states that the Earth's outer crust can shift over the mantle as a single unit, displacing entire continents from their previous latitudes within a geologically short period. If a displacement occurred at the close of the last ice age, Antarctica would have moved from a temperate position into the polar circle within a span of years, possibly months. The civilization the Sumerian tablet names would have had no time to evacuate fully. Some of them did escape. The mammoth remains found in Siberia, frozen with undigested food still in their stomachs, are not the artifact of a slow climate change. They are the artifact of a rapid event. Tropical vegetation was buried under permafrost before it could decay, animals frozen mid-meal. The same event that buried the mammoths also buried the cities the tablet describes. But not all of the inhabitants died. Some of them got out. They scattered, carrying their knowledge with them. They went to the Nile and became the figures the Egyptians later remembered as Thoth and Osiris. They went to Mesopotamia and became the Anunnaki, Enki, and Enlil, the gods who taught agriculture, writing, and law. They went to South America and became Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl, the bearded teachers who arrived from across the sea bringing astronomy and architecture. They were not gods. They were refugees. They built monuments aligned with stellar precision because they had to preserve their knowledge in stone, in mathematics, in the only languages that would survive the people who carried them. They drew maps of the world they had lost and gave those maps to local cartographers who copied them century after century until they ended up in the hands of an Ottoman admiral in 1513. They wrote down the names of the rulers they had served on clay tablets in cuneiform. They recorded the descent of the ice and the location of Kuga Ki. Then they died. Their descendants forgot, their tablets were buried, and their continent was sealed beneath 2 miles of ice that nobody is allowed to excavate. The question is no longer whether the continent existed. The question is what still lies down there, why the tablet was restricted, why the Vostok team was pulled, and why nobody is allowed to dig. The tablet exists, the translation exists, the inscriptions on the Antarctic coast exist, the maps exist, the core samples exist, the magnetic anomalies exist. We are told the continent beneath the ice is empty. We are told nobody was ever there, but the Sumerians named it. They mapped it. They wrote about its rivers and its rulers, and the one place on Earth where independent excavation is functionally impossible happens to be the exact location their tablet describes. If this video made you question what you thought you knew about the buried history of this planet, you are not alone. Next week, I am breaking down the specific Anunnaki passages describing the descent of the ice line by line. Subscribe so you do not miss it. And the video on screen right now covers the Antarctic structures the official record refuses to acknowledge. They named the continent. We cannot dig there. Maybe that is the point.